10th game of the World Championship 1986 between Kasparov and Karpov. This game is Queens Gambit Declined. D55, D4, D5, C4, E6, knight C3, 7, knight F3, knight F6. This game follows their 23rd game of their second match in 1985. After knight F6, bishop G5, H6, bishop into F6, bishop into F6, E3, Karpov castles, rook C1, C6, bishop D3, knight D7, Kasparov castles, T into C4, bishop into C4, E5, H3, E into D4, E into D4, C5. C5 is a dubious move. After black C5, Kasparov played bishop B3. It is a novelty played after 14 minutes of thought. In the first game mentioned above, the continuation here was knight E4, C into D4, knight into F6, queen B3. Queen B3 is an excellent move. Queen B6. In the second game, Goldwyn varied with knight B6, bishop B3, bishop F5. Let us come back to our game. The last move played after bishop B3 was C into D4, knight D5. Instead of knight D5, if knight into D4, let us go back and see. Knight C5. Let us go back. Last move played is knight D5, B6. This is the only good move in this position. The idea is not merely to finch onto his queen bishop, but also to play knight C5 as indicated. If knight E5 instead of B6, if knight E5, let us go back and see that. Instead of B6, knight E5, knight into D4, bishop D7, rook C7. Rook C7 is a good move. Bishop C6, knight into C6, B into C6, knight into F6, queen into F6, F4, knight G6, queen C2, with a good game for white. After the last move B6, Kasparov played knight into D4. Another possibility was knight into F6, knight into f6. Instead of knight into f6, if queen into f6, let us go and see that combination. Instead of knight into f6, queen into f6, queen into d4, queen into d4, knight into d4. Let us go back, and after knight into f6, knight into f6, queen into d4, bishop b7, queen into d8, rook into d8, knight e5. But this is not Karpov's normal preference. So let us go back to the game. After knight into d4, that last move, bishop into d4 is played. Instead of bishop into d4, another possibility was knight c5. Let us see that. Knight c5, knight into f6, queen into f6, bishop d5, bishop b7, bishop into b7, knight into b7, rook c6. And white pieces are clearly superior. So let us go back. See, the last move played is bishop into d4, queen into d4, knight c5, bishop c4, bishop b7, rook f d1, rook c8, queen g4, bishop into d5, rook into d5, queen e7, rook c d1, doubling the rooks, queen e4. Queen e4 is a excellent move. Queen into e4, knight into e4. White's only advantage now is his bishop against the knight on the open board. But many of black's problem is solved by the exchange of queens. Bishop a6, knight f6. Through this tactical device, Karpov keeps black's rooks of his second rank. Bishop into c8, knight into d5, bishop a6, knight f6, f4. If rook e1, let us go back and see. Instead of f4, if rook e1, rook b8 is a excellent move. Let us go back. After f4, rook e8, king f2, king f8. After king f8, king f3, rook e7, rook d8, check, rook e8, rook into e8, knight into e8, king e4, king e7, bishop c4, knight c7, king e5, f6 check. This is an excellent move, not allowing the king to come to the king side of black. King f5, knight e8, defending the pawn. King e4, knight c7, h4, king d6, king f5, king e7, king g6, king f8, king f5, e7, king e4, king d6, g4, king e7, b4, king d6, king f5. There is no way both of them could penetrate others. So draw agreed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. Please subscribe so that you can see all the 24 games of this World Championship. Thanks for watching once again.